So we come to stillness of water, when it is so still that it forms a mirror. We turn now to the Zhuangzi, the master Zhuang, who died in the 3rd century BC. If he perchance had come to Athens in Greece, he would have found as a young man that Socrates had died about 50 years before his own birth. And it should be noted that some of the writing attributed to him may in fact be written by others. A passage of the Zhuangzi 13, The Way of Heaven, 1.5, speaks of the stillness of the sages in the way that water is still. Quoting, "Water, when it is still, reflects back even your eyebrows and beard. It's perfectly level, and from this the carpenter takes his level. If water stilled offers such clarity, imagine what pure spirit offers. The sage's heart is stilled. Heaven and earth are reflected in it, the mirror of all life. Empty, still, calm, plain, quiet, silent, non-active. This is the centeredness of heaven and earth, and of the Tao and virtue." This is a passage about stillness, and stillness as an approach to human behaviour and human relationships. But it uses the image of the mirror provided by a clear pool of water. This, of course, is also familiar in the West, and it is fascinating that both cultures explored the symbolic meaning of the mirror image. We have in Greece and Rome the myth of Narcissus. Narcissus was a handsome young man, vain and conscious of his good looks, and he was followed in the woods by a young woman called Echo, who had an affliction whereby she would simply echo the last few words of what he said. He came to see his image in the clear reflection of a pond on the edge of the forest, and that moment was followed by his death. He fell in and drowned. We do not know quite how to explain the connection between self-recognition in the clear water of the pond and death. The poet offers us no exegesis. Nevertheless, there is endless discussion of the meaning of narcissism, and there are definitions in psychology and psychiatric textbooks. The general drift of them is that a narcissist is a person with an obsessive interest and even infatuation with their own looks and their own image. A narcissist is said to be an obsessive self-lover. He or she tends to seek out a stage on which to shine, and they tend to surround themselves with people who reinforce the image they have of themselves, or at least the image that they want to have. Maybe there is an element of self-doubt in such people, and that's why they go to such lengths to ensure that their image is registered in the consciousness of others in the way that they want to be. But the textbooks don't talk about self-doubt. Such people expect others to provide a mirror which provides and sends back the image which is wanted. Other people become cheerleaders, if you wish. The self of one's desire or imagination is what is sought, and they reject those who reflect back unwanted or unfamiliar images. People are thus made into distorting mirrors for the narcissist. The idea of the mirror is dominant in Western thought, and I've written about it elsewhere. It's throughout classical antiquity, and we remember that St. Paul says in the New Testament, Now we see in a mirror in an obscure way, but on that day we shall see face to face. This passage is usually interpreted as a reference to catoptromancy, but it is a little difficult to interpret. Catoptromancy is the practice of divination, a form of magic, trying to see into the future or even into the present using a mirror. Mirrors in the classical world were very fuzzy and sent back distorted images of all kinds, which led them to being used in such a way. If you looked into one, you could see all kinds of things. The best way to see yourself was to look into a bowl of still water, and the Zhuangzi makes the same observation. The puzzling thing about St. Paul's verse is that he refers to looking into a mirror for the purpose of seeing oneself, but ends up with seeing God face to face at the end time. Is he suggesting that we will see our own faces with greater clarity, and that this will in effect be the face of God? I leave that as a question. Plato had said that we obtain self-knowledge by looking into the mirror which is constituted by the eye of the other person. If we peer into the eye of our neighbour, we will see a tiny reflection of ourselves in his pupil, in the pupil of his eye. And so the word pupil comes from the Latin meaning a little doll. That is the little doll which we see in the eye of the other person. I think Plato meant to say that we only obtain understanding of ourselves when we see what other people think of us, and we see ourselves through the lenses which they use. We do not gain self-understanding by simple self-contemplation in isolation. Much later than Plato, Jacques Lacan, Lacan, a 20th century philosopher and psychiatrist in Paris, suggested that the moment of self-recognition in a mirror is the moment at which the child achieves self-consciousness and self-understanding. He called this the mirror phase. So at one moment, the child, when younger, sees a child in the mirror and thinks it is someone else. But at the moment of full personhood, he or she recognizes that image as himself or herself. So it would appear that in Lacan's view, self-recognition is a solitary matter requiring nothing other than oneself and the mirror. And how different it is for us, living in an age where mirrors give accurate reflections of startling clarity. This only began with the development of mirror technology in the 17th century by the Saint-Gobain company in Paris. From then on, mirrors began to dominate the walls of the apartments of Paris, whereas up until then, they were covered with artworks. And the ability to accurately perceive one's own image was only enhanced, of course, by the invention of the camera, and then following that, by the ability to turn it on oneself. And now we live in the age of selfies, where we incessantly turn the camera on ourselves, or the other option appears to be focusing the camera on a plate of food. But let us say that what the mirror does in the West is bring self-recognition and self-understanding. The mirror of the Zhuangzi, as quoted above, is quite different, but there are some similarities. As in Western antiquity, water provided probably the only way of seeing oneself. A clear pool of water, or water in a bowl, provided the only way of seeing oneself with any clarity. What a different way to live. Our ability to see ourselves with perfect clarity is only relatively recent, and I wonder what changes this will bring to the human experience as time goes on. In China, bronze mirrors came into use from about the 8th century BC onwards, and they tended to be buried with the dead. And the practice of using vessels filled with water for mirror images was quite common. And the understanding that mirrors could convey a message of some kind was well established. But in our passage of the Zhuangzi, the clarity of the mirror provided by the still water is taken as a metaphor. But I did say I didn't like that word, didn't I? So let's not say a metaphor, let's say a likeness of the mind of the sage. The mind of the sage provides complete clarity for the world. The mind of the sage provides the real and clear image of society and the universe. It follows that if you wish to have clarity, you must peer into the mind of the sage, and then you will see yourself and society as it really is. In other words, you may have a certain image of yourself, and when you look into the mind of the sage, you will find that image is distorted or untrue, because the sage provides the clear and unquestionable image of the water mirror. Or it's possible that other people have a certain view of you and of your relationships to them, to other people in general, and when you look into the mind of the sage, you see them as they really are, you and your relationships with other people as they really are, despite what might be said or thought by the others. What are the key points of the Zhuangzi's passage on the mirror, which we've quoted above? Firstly, there is an emphasis on the completely level quality of the still water, so level that even the carpenter could take his level from it. This suggests a standard or a norm, with the image of the craftsman recalling the skill of the carpenter in making things level so that a building is straight and properly constructed. This magical art of the carpenter is recalled by the absolute level quality of the still water, it being hard to find a perfect level in any other part of the landscape. This is part of the mystical power of water to command our attention, and it does suggest that in the mind of the sage can be found the norm that is required for human living. Secondly, the mind of the sage has complete clarity, like the pool of water, and reflects back heaven and earth, and life itself. The qualities of this mirror-like mind are actually a list of the absence of qualities. This mind is empty, still, silent, inactive, and there is one word, plain, which was translated by the word tastelessness by the older version of leg. And I do wonder whether there is a culinary metaphor here, so that plain or bland food, as opposed to spicy food, is being referred to. Food is a good metaphor in China. If you have ever eaten in Sichuan province, you will know about food which attacks the mouth. So then, if there is a reference here to plain food, we can understand the difference. Not spicy. In any case, the mirror of the mind, the mind of the sage, is composed of an absence of normal activity and anything which might in any way be intrusive. It is silent. There is no haste. So thank you for joining me, and we will continue next time on the mirror of the sage, and what we see in the mind of the sage. Thank you again.